welcome people. This is the third panel today that World Can't Wait has put together on the thinking that we really wanted to concentrate people's attention on key problems and questions and contradictions that are going on in the world today and orient people towards what are we going to do about it. And this one is a little complex, so let me just introduce it. World Can't Wait has a slogan that says, humanity, oh, I happen to be wearing it. Humanity and the planet come first.
Yeah.
And why humanity? Because we wanted to go directly up against this, America comes first. You know, we're all, to quote our president, we're all Americans. Americans, right? No, we care about the whole world. And this is a really important principle to inculcate and communicate to people. But the other part of the slogan is the planet, the global environment being completely destroyed by the system. And we have found in the work that we've done over the last 9 years that there's this very odd divide. There's the people who really care about U.S. war, Iraq, Afghanistan, and that history, who've been very focused on what the U.S. is doing to the people of the world, and very dedicated about that. But they will think sometimes, and I've had conversations about this, well, there's people being killed right now. The environment, that's huge, and that's kind of for later. What can we really do about that? Conversely, there's a big, not big enough nearly, but there's a growing movement based on trying to save the global environment in this country and around the world. And we've also found that people in that movement are extremely unaware of, you know, to be generous, of how much the U.S. military and the U.S. system is contributing to the destruction of the planet. You know, for instance, in a very basic way, this statistic shows a lot. The single biggest user of fossil fuels on the globe is the U.S. military. Not even the U.S. economy, but the U.S. military in these occupations. And when you think about how this is all part of burning up the planet, you start to think, wow, this is not two separate movements, nor should it be. People should be thinking about all of these things coming together. So we had this opportunity to bring a couple of people together to talk about this, and because it's the Left Forum, we said, let's do this. We heard about Dr. Mozhgan Savabieasfahani and her work in studying the toxic waste left by the U.S. military in Iraq that is still ongoing, still developing, and we felt people need to know more about that because we don't even know enough about it. And we also wanted to bring Larry Everest, who's a writer for Revolution newspaper, who's worked on Iran, Iraq. He was down there in New Orleans in 2010 when the Gulf oil spill took place, working on all the implications of that on the environment as well. And he's been doing work on this for decades as well, so we thought, what a good combination. And we're not stuffing this with a lot of speakers. Myself, I'm going to sit back and we're going to hear, first of all, Mozhgan will speak, and then Larry, and then we'll just have a time when we can throw it around and see what we can think on this big problem that we have. First of all, people's lack of information, not knowing what's going on, and second of all, people conceiving it in either narrow, inadequate, or sometimes pitifully puny ways in terms of what we can do. So World Can't Wait is very glad to have both of you here. Thank you. Thank you. I want to mention for people who may have to leave early that tomorrow morning at 10, we're doing the fourth in the panels that we're doing And this is about the U.S. drone war, which is, you know, very connected to this question especially. So we welcome you all to come back. And right now we'll sit back and try to absorb what we can, take notes, think about questions, and then we'll have a conversation. So, Mozhgan.
Thank you. Should I start? Or do you want to talk about it? Well, thank you everybody for coming. My name is Mozhgan. Thank you for the generous, introduction. I've been looking for the past 5 or 6 years. I've been looking at effects, actually, just what has happened in Iraqi population after the 2003 invasion of Iraq in terms of their health. As early as 2005, physicians have been interviewing with Western media, talking about increases in birth defects and cancers in many Iraqi cities. So I got interested and I started working with some of these researchers inside Iraq. We managed to publish a couple of papers. We have just submitted another one. And so outside of the United States, primarily, this whole issue of pollution in Iraq and also increase in birth defects and cancers actually got quite a bit of coverage. So in order to catch you guys up with what has been already reported on that issue, I have about a short, about 4.5 minute sort of clip of the interviews that people in the team that I've worked with, myself, Dr. Al-Sabab, we've had interviewing with BBC, with HBO, and places like that. So you will get a flavor for the impact we have already had in the media and globally, not so much inside the United States, but outside the US. And then after that, I will get more into what my research is. I don't want to dwell so much on our results. If anybody is interested, I can get deeper into it after we, finish. But what I would like to do is to sort of connect what's happening in Iraq, which is a repeat, really, of what has happened in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, in, Kosovo, after the bombardments of NATO and the United States, what has happened in other places, Philippines, Korea. There is no place in the world where the U.S. military has gone and has not left it a total environmental wreck. All these places that I just mentioned, there have been increases in birth defects, increases in cancers after the United States established their military bases and made truly a big mess of the environment there. I want to be able to talk more about what it is that we can do in order to change the way things are right now. And then to do that, I will talk about student campaigns on the campus of the University of Michigan and how they organized and actually had a big impact on their university community. So let me show you the first 4 small videotape, and then we'll move on from there. So let's hope that this is going to work. So the next slide, and I will start it. It will have a little bit of a delay, but it will basically be, this is a mention of our research in the New York Times. It's the most recent coverage we got in March, where I spoke in Washington, D.C. about the same issue, environmental pollution and U.S. military waste and things like that. So now I'm waiting to start the videotape. Let's see, is it going to start? It stopped. I did that, but it's not coming.
Now to Iraq and the deadly legacy of war. 8 years ago, one of the bloodiest battles of the war played out in the city of Fallujah. Hundreds of Iraqi civilians were killed, their homes and businesses destroyed. And now, all these years on, a new study has found a staggering rise in defects in children born in the aftermath of that conflict. One of the lead authors of that report is Mozhgan Savabieasfahani with the University of Michigan, and I spoke with her a short time ago. Dr. Savabieasfahani, explain to me, when you talk about the exposure to metals which have been released by the bombs and the bullets, clearly we're not talking about people who've been shot or received shrapnel wounds. It seems something a lot more insidious here.
Yes, absolutely.
there are various kinds of metals used in bombs and other ammunitions, and when they explode, they scatter in the environment, and they stay for a while, and then they settle down, but they remain. Metals are very stable, and they stay for a long time, and this is how the public gets exposed to it. What explodes actually becomes airborne. It becomes very fine particles that stay in the environment. It's tiny, it stays there, and when for example, wind comes, it gets re-injected into the air.
Could there be any other explanation?
So this is a reporter that went to Iraq and interviewed Dr. Al-Sabah. He's an Iraqi doctor.
With the water, because why they have this increment here? We don't have any explanation. Why they have this increment? How you could
He's
explain it?
basically saying, why is there this rise?
And now, the HBO original series, Vice.
For our next story, we go to Iraq. It's been left to independent scientists and researchers to figure out what effects these weapons have had.
When you drop these bombs in the environment, what happens is that once that explosion occurs, fine particles that contain metals get spread all over the environment. It'll enter the soil, it'll enter the water, it gets taken up by plants, people who are in an area that's being bombed, it gets right into their system, and then slowly it exposes them from inside. These damages can be much more severe in a child or in a fetus because they don't have the detoxifying mechanisms that an adult body normally has.
So, I think this is probably finished. I'm not sure.
دکتر مژگان صوابی‌اصفهانی که الان به ما ملحق میشه. دکتر صوابی ممکنه ببینید چه آماری ما داریم درباره گستردگی اپیدمی کودکان نامسازگار در عراق.
I'm repeating the same thing when you throw a bomb. And then we had an interview with Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera brought an American general. And I'm basically saying my best guess is that these rises in birth defects and cancers is due to U.S. bombardments.
Well, a new study takes a look at birth defects in two of the hardest hit cities during the Iraq War, including Fallujah in central Iraq and Basra in the southeastern region. And the effects are devastating. You're looking at babies born with severe birth defects in the Fallujah General Hospital between May and August 2010. The most common abnormalities include congenital heart defects, neural tube defects, and facial clefting.
All right, so next slide. So at the time when I was giving these interviews about why are these things happening, and I kept saying my best guess is the bombardments, at that time it wasn't really in the news that the United States has these massive, large burn pits burning in every U.S. military base. And the company that was in charge of burning waste in these military bases was Halliburton. I'm sure everybody has heard of them. So what they were doing, they were getting all the waste that this base is generating, and they were burning them in open air pits, generating immense smoke constantly. Apparently since 2003, between 2003 and 2010, they burnt this stuff openly, and the smoke would be just enormous, just spreading all over. So that was another huge source of pollution, which at that point, when I was interviewing, didn't know about. So I said nothing about it. But later I learned. And so let me tell you about the various sources of pollution that could be affecting the health in Iraq right now. One is, of course, the bombs and bullets that they throw at you. The other one is the bases of the military bases and the junkyards that are associated with them. And of course the burn pits that are located on these bases. So here I will show you a slide of U.S. bases, major U.S. bases in Iraq right now. Can everybody see the map? Is it hard to see it? No? Okay, so the little blue and red dots that you see, they're actually locations of major US military bases. At the height of US invasion adventure in Iraq, they had over 500 military bases. This is only 75 of them. Some of them have gone out of commission at this point, but we don't know how many. But this is really what is the major ones. As you can see, the city Hawija, all the way in the north, and Fallujah, and Basra, all the way in the south. These are the places where we did our sampling, and we looked at the samples from mothers and children, and what we discovered is that the population is heavily contaminated with very toxic metals like lead and mercury. Lead and mercury are neurotoxic compounds. Their presence alone is enough to show you that what you see in children in terms of birth defects and developmental delay could very well have to do with exposure during pregnancy, during fetal life, to these compounds. So we published about that, and I just want to give you a sense of how large these bases that I'm talking about are. It's hard to find good pictures of them, but this is one I found. It actually shows you the swimming pool. It's an aerial view of one of the swimming pools in one of these bases. They are enormous in size, and the kind of junk they generate is a lot, starting from styrofoam cups, batteries, tires, all kinds of stuff that they generate. Now, aside from the bases, I want to show you a little clip of what junkyards that are associated with these bases, what do they look like and what do they contain. Now, there is plenty of these junkyards with metals and busted vehicles and busted tanks, but I found a little videotape of a tank junkyard, and I will play it for you just to get a sense of how large these things are, and then I'll tell you what are the sources of pollution from these sites. But anyway, basically this clip shows you a huge area with dead tanks and all kinds of junk, metal junkyard basically. And the reason why these things are a major source of pollution is that, first of all, things like tanks and trucks and rubber, plastics and stuff, when they are in a big, large area, what happens is they start to weather. Dust and wind, they keep breaking down, and the toxic stuff in it will end up in soil and water and air, and people start getting exposed to them. On top of that, there are people who will go into these junkyards and they take pieces of metal to sell and to make a living out of it. And so in that way also these toxic metals end up in the city, in contact with people, and people get exposed to pollution from these things. The next few slides, they're just too long, and I don't want to belabor the point. The point is that military bases, as well as junkyard, as well as these burn pits, are terribly toxic to public health in Iraq, and they have been. I will show you a few pictures of burn pits. This will list the kinds of things they burn in these burn pits: batteries, appliances, even human body parts, and the size of these burn pits. Somebody is saying in Honest Times and in Business Insider, they're saying that some of them are as big as 10 acres wide. So 1 acre is about the size of a US football field. And imagine 10 of them burning at the same time for 7 years straight. And you are living down the wind from them. So it's pretty difficult to endure this kind of exposure. This is what they basically look like. This is one in Iraq. This is also in Iraq. You see the black smoke that comes out. It contains all kinds of nasty stuff. And once you inhale it all the time, especially if you're a pregnant woman or a growing child, it's very toxic. Here's another picture, again from Iraq. This is a huge one in Afghanistan. Apparently, the soldiers who come back from Afghanistan and some bases in Iraq show enormously damaged lungs.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. I'll finish this with just showing you one more picture of these kids. So, all of this to tell you that U.S. military personnel are also affected by the pollution that the U.S. has created in Iraq. They've come back with all kinds of illnesses, And now they are winning some from the US government because they've been allowed to go ahead and sue Halliburton for damages that was done to their health. I won't get too much further into this. I wonder if I can see my entire slideshow. Oh, here. And that way I can go forward. This is a slide that shows you that a lot of, these are two Iraqi doctors, Dr. Jawad Al-Ali and Dr. Rushdie, who have been talking about the same effects that the US soldiers are complaining about in their patients, basically cancers and birth defects. There are stories about entire neighborhood having a special kind of cancer, multiple cancers in one individual, which is very, very rare, leukemia in very young children. So these are extremely, they were very difficult times for Iraqi doctors. And of course there is no help. There has been no response. Whatever the US government has said has been like, we are worried about the health of Iraqis and we've done nothing wrong and there is nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
So let me move on to, I have many, many slides about the research that we have done, but I think I will only show you this one. The areas where we did a sample in Iraq, Hawija, and the lower red dot is Fallujah, and the farthest southward is Basra. But let me show you the next slide. This is a family of several families whose children we tested for exposure to metals, and we found that indeed cadmium, arsenic, lead is very high in these children, and the kinds of disorders that they exhibit, these are the kinds of metals that are extremely high in these children. And this slide will show you, oops, sorry, I went too fast. All right, here. So this picture is some of the children in our study, which shows, number A and B shows you children with brain disorders, C and D and E are showing you epileptic children. And these are conditions that are very, very difficult to manage, even in the United States. But imagine you are in Iraq, a very, very poor little town, and you have to care for these children who are severely disabled. Next slide is of children with major birth defects from Fallujah. These children are pretty much all died by now, because these are pictures that go back to 2008. Some of these disorders have no names in medical books. Let me go back to what I really want to talk about, which is now what? What do we do now? Here's my slide. What now? Let's see. We know about Vietnam. We know about the fact that those 3 airports in Vietnam were the main source of public exposure to dioxins. To this day, the United States has been dragging their feet and not doing any cleanup. Only very recently, the US has decided they will give about $40 million to clean one of these massive polluted airports, which is the one all the way in the north, Da Nang. But during the past, how many years is it? 40 years, millions of people have been exposed to dioxin. Cancers and birth defects are rampant in Vietnam, and it would have all been avoided had we as a society been able to force the United States to clean up this mess. And maybe, very, very clearly, maybe Iraq would never have happened had we been able to force them to address this. But we weren't able to do it. Now, so what to do now? I'm not going to show you, I'm going to show you this slide. So, we haven't been able to address it because this is the way that the society is prioritized in the United States. This is how much money goes into the military budget in the United States. It's enormous. Compare that to the other countries. Is this figure clear to everyone? It's basically saying the United States spends billions, 600,000 million, is that correct? Yeah, a year on military budget. Now, only recently, there has been absolutely no public outrage about this. No public outrage. I've never heard it, and I've lived in this country for 30 years. Only recently, from within the establishment, there has been little sweeps, and this Dr. Bushri, who is at MIT, and he is a security consultant, he said in an interview, he has been saying that the current levels of about 700 billion a year on defense is not sustainable. I hate that word, sustainable, because they use it for things that they should say, this level of expenditure on projects that will kill the people and the planet is abhorrent, but they say, well, it's not sustainable. If it was sustainable, then we could do it, right? But basically, the reason for not doing it, he's saying, well, it's because of budget deficit. Not that it's criminal, not that it's inhumane, but that it's a budget situation. So the next slide I will show you is this one. All right, come on. Here. All right, where is it? All right, I'm just going to say this. Do it. Next. There you go. So this slide is probably less familiar to all of you guys. What it's showing is how our institutions of higher learning, universities, how they work really hand in glove with the Department of Defense. This is a graph that shows you military funding for top universities in the United States. Johns Hopkins, Texas, University of Texas, MIT, Stanford, all of them are really working closely with the Department of Defense, providing technological support, perfecting their instruments of war. So what I'm thinking is that this is where we can start putting pressure on the universities and telling them that this kind of behavior is unacceptable and that we want to see a stop to it. So how do we do it? How do we confront our universities and force them to act on what we see as moral and just, and don't let them continue with things as they are? I'll tell you a couple of stories from University of Michigan, student organizations who pushed for, they had two campaigns past semester, one about divesting from fossil fuels, and one about divesting from companies that promote occupation of Palestinian land and jeopardize human rights of the Palestinians. And both of these campaigns have been quite successful on the university campus. As you can see, there's hundreds of them. And so they wrote this divestment resolution, they brought it to their student government. The student government said that we will not even talk about it. We will independently suspend it, correct? When the student government said that, the students got extremely angry. And I want you to see the videotape of what happened after they heard that their resolution is not going to be talked about. And then you will see the power of organizing 200-300 students and how it can totally change the whole atmosphere.
They're chanting divest, divest.
Right. So here is the videotape. I hope this one will work, Blaine. Oh, this is a picture of divest from fossil fuel people. And this one, if you are at some kind of an institution where you have a way to bring these things into the attention of that institution, of course it's a very risky business. But I think that's the only way. There's no way we can win this without objecting, without confronting, without doing something about the way things are now. If we continue to maintain our, composure and quiet, and things will go on like this forever. But if you don't, things might change a little bit. So that's what I would just say. Thank you.